Hello, and thank you for joining the 2023 Global DEI Conference. I am Melissa Ashley, a member of One Business World and your host today. For those of you joining for the first time, the Global DEI Conference is a global gathering of business leaders and executives from very different fields of study and different experts sharing sound advice. And today we are welcoming Gavriella Schuster, Learning and Development Partner at Rally. Gavriella will be speaking on the topic of allies in action, and she'll be talking about how to learn the behaviors of intentional allies to empower others and create an inclusive workplace. So welcome, Gavriella, and we're so happy you could share your expertise with us today. Thanks for being here.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Melissa. It's great to be here. So I just noticed that my video might be a little white, but that's okay. Um, I am so thrilled to be here and wanted to start by giving a little bit more background about me. I have spent the last 30 plus years in the high-tech industry, and my previous role was a corporate vice president at Microsoft Corporation. And today I am also a board director on several boards. But the thing I spend most of my time on is promoting allies and helping allies understand the actions that they can take. So as you all know, as DEI professionals, having diversity within the organization is incredibly important and drives some fantastic outcomes for the organization relative to outperformance of their peers, the likelihood of creating value, higher profitability. But the value of diversity cannot be realized without inclusion. Inclusion is a key element. And so the question is, how do you create that inclusive environment? And there are both systemic things that an organization can do to create an inclusive environment, but a lot of it really rests on people, on the leadership and the individuals and the cultural norms of the organization to create that inclusive environment that welcomes and supports diversity. Because you could have all of the diversity you want, but if you have a leader who has a my way or the highway approach, then people will not be comfortable sharing their unique perspectives. And then you will not get the value of that diversity. So how do you create that inclusive environment? I believe that from an individual's perspective, what you have to do is create the cultural norms that encourage people to act in an inclusive way. And I think at the root of that is allyship, helping people to understand what is allyship and how to create that environment of allyship and practice with intention the behaviors of allies every single day. So what is allyship as I'm thinking about it? It is an individual who recognizes their own privilege, power, and position in an organization, and then uses that privilege or that power to confer it onto others. They use their power to empower others. So it's not about rescuing someone else. It's not about taking care of them. It is about using your own privilege and using that to empower someone else, interrupting the flow, creating examples, setting examples, being a role model, and creating those norms. And that's what allyship is about. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what are those actions that allies take every single day with intention. Now, I spent 26 years at Microsoft. And so as a result, I use a lot of acronyms. So I'm going to actually introduce you to an acronym that will help you to remember who are allies. I want to also share with you why I believe this is so important. So I mentioned that I spent the last 30 plus years in high tech. And as you may know, high tech has very few females, an underrepresented number of females. And during my time, I was often the only woman in the room, the only woman on a team, the only woman in the leadership team. And I faced a lot of both aggressive behaviors as well as microaggressions throughout my time in that role. And so when I look back and thought, what really helped me to succeed despite those headwinds? It was the actions of allies. It was my ability to enroll or enlist people to become my allies, and then the actions that those allies took. And the way that I enrolled them or enlisted them in to become my allies was to share with them my experience and to be very clear about what would be helpful to me in that moment. And those individuals, men, stepped up to become my allies. But this is my focus on allyship is not a gender thing, but I can only speak from my own experience. But really, these actions of allies applies to any number of people who find themselves only in a room, whether that's the only woman, the only Black, the only lesbian, the only transgender individual, the only individual with other capabilities. They are an only, and they need allies. So what are those actions? What I did is I took the word allies because I want to make this something very, very simple for you to remember. And all you have to remember is the word allies. And then I'm going to explain to you what each of those things mean. So what are the behaviors that allies take? They advocate, listen, lift, include, elevate, and sponsor. Those 6 simple actions that you take with intention every single day, those are the behaviors of allies. Now, as Melissa mentioned, I have a whole training course on this, and so it goes in much more depth. But this is a quick overview of what those 6 actions are. And I believe that those 6 actions are not only the actions of allies, but they are the actions of leaders. Great leaders practice with intention these 6 actions every single day in the moment. And it becomes those little moments, those small moments that matter, that make all the difference. So let's talk about what each one of them means. Advocate. As an ally, you advocate. It is a verb because it is an action. You start to create awareness. What is going on around you? Step outside of yourself. Step outside of your own head and really pay attention to what's going on around you. Are you in a room where there is somebody who is an only for some reason or another and needs to be more part of the organization that you can be an ally for? And then action. Recognizing what are the actions that you can take. Taking action, again, is not about rescuing somebody, and it's not about placing blame or shame on someone that might have just committed an inclusion inhibitor, that might have just shut somebody else down. It's recognizing when that happens, and without blame or shame, taking a moment of exclusion and making it a moment of inclusion. That's what advocates do. They recognize when that happens and they take action in the moment and they own it. So if something was just said that makes you go, oh, you recognize that that could be an offensive thing and other people might be having the same reaction, and you take that moment to turn it from a moment of ugh to a moment of inclusion. You recognize what just happened and you shift the dialogue. So I want to give you some examples of what that looks like. These are some inclusion inhibitors. Now, I use the word inclusion inhibitors. It's more widely common to talk about microaggressions, but I think that microaggressions has a bad connotation, and inclusion inhibitors really calls out what happens. There's a moment where somebody has been excluded. And what you want to do is now include them. And so here's the top 5 inclusion inhibitors that occur for women, but you can look up on Google any of the top 5 that occur for people who are gay, people who are transgender, people who are Black, and understand, start to recognize and create your own awareness around those moments. The top 5 for women is being interrupted or spoken over more often than others, having their judgment questioned in their area of expertise, being ignored until they can prove their worth, not being given credit for their ideas or their contributions, or being asked to perform stereotypical tasks like, could you take notes? Could you go welcome our guests? Could you go get coffee? Could you plan this event? Those are all gender stereotype requests that are often made to women, regardless of the position that they hold in an organization. And as an ally, when you recognize one of those has occurred, you can step in and own your own reaction to it. So for instance, if a colleague has been interrupted or spoken over, you can simply say, oh, John, hold on. I don't know that Gavriella was quite finished. Gavriella, would you mind repeating what you just said? That's it. But that moment of allyship makes all the difference in the way that that meeting goes and sets a norm of inclusion for the organization. If someone is not being listened to because they are the newest member of the team, as an ally, you can step in and say, you know, John, we brought you in here because of your experience in da, 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 da. And I would love for you to share more of that with the group. In that moment, you are conferring your privilege to John and opening the door for him to have higher levels of credibility in the room. So those are some examples of what you can do as an ally to advocate. And it's a 5-step process. First, you have to be aware of what these inclusion inhibitors are and start recognizing them. They're happening every day in every meeting that you are in. Then you have to have the courage to speak up. You have to practice taking action, saying something, interrupting the flow, challenging the status quo without creating blame or shame, setting a new norm for your team. And then you practice, and those words start to come to your mind and they become habit. And in my training, I have a whole workshop around what those are and how to respond, and some of those words that you can start to practice in your brain and then get some embedded there. So that's one, advocate. The next one is about listening. Very often people who are onlys, they become shyer because they are frequently ignored, overlooked, dismissed, and have no allies. As an ally, you can make sure you are active and present listening, that you are removing the filters in your own brain, that you are not stuck in your last meeting, that you are paying attention to what is going on and you are actively listening to what someone has to say. That's not listening to solve, that's not listening to respond. It is staying present and asking questions and being curious to really understand their point of view. Tell me more about that. I think I heard you say, how can I help you? Those are active listening techniques that you can practice every day. The third action that allies take is lifting up those around them. As I said, when you're an only, very often your confidence starts to wane. You start to question yourself, your own judgment. You don't recognize what kinds of feedback and organizational dynamics are occurring because of what you represent as an only versus who you are as a person. So what you can do as an ally is to find those moments, find those opportunities to lift up others around you. Put away your critical eye and look for positive reinforcement. I really like the way that you framed that question. When you came into the meeting and began with whatever, that was a really great opener. The way that you led that project on was super helpful. Help somebody to understand and build their confidence, the things that they do well. Really focus on that and lift them up. Now, these first three actions, I call these reactive allyship behaviors because you can practice them anytime, anywhere. You don't need anyone's permission to listen to them, to provide them with positive reinforcement and positive feedback, and to advocate in the moment to interrupt the flow and give them voice. The next three that I'm going to talk about are proactive allyship behaviors, meaning that you do want somebody to be in partnership with you, to give you permission to be their ally. You need to understand who they are and what they want, because the next one is about include. That is about making sure that somebody who is being excluded is you are actively including them. If you show up to a meeting and the subject matter expert is not in the room, you're going to call that out and say, you know, Gavriella is a subject matter expert. I think we should invite her into this meeting. But if you haven't had prior conversations with me about inviting me into the meeting, that might put me in the spot. That might put me in an awkward place. And so your attempted allyship might backfire on you. So you want to make sure that you are in partnership, that you have my permission to do that. If we're all sitting in a meeting and I haven't said anything and we are in partnership on the allyship, then you might say, oh, Gavriella, last week you mentioned to me. Would you mind sharing that with the group and kind of bring me in? Or, you know what, Joe, I think we haven't really heard from everyone in the room. How about if we do a round robin and give everybody an opportunity to speak up? But if we aren't in partnership on that, calling me out for not saying anything might have the opposite effect. So we want to be working together. Inclusion is about intentionally and being aware of those who might be left out, taking action to bring somebody into the dialogue, and really engaging. So the next one is elevate. Proactive allyship that requires permission in elevating somebody's position. So that is either giving somebody an opportunity to meet with a customer, giving them higher level visibility and recognition for the job that they have done. Very often onlys are overlooked and they are not recognized. They play a background behind the scenes role. And so creating opportunities for them to be more visible, whether it's making a presentation to the executive team or even just to their manager, their management, meeting with customers, meeting with partners, presenting at conferences, leading a visible project, a very important project. Those are all ways to elevate somebody's position and give them more visibility. Even calling them out in an award or creating a report that highlights their accomplishments. Those are all moments of elevation, and that is a behavior of an ally. And then the last one is sponsorship. Many people kind of conflate allyship and sponsorship. They are not the same thing. Sponsorship is a behavior of allyship, but I would say that it is kind of your cherry on top finale of allyship, because it means that you really know somebody very well, that you are so comfortable that you are willing to put your own name and your own brand on the line for them. You promote them even when they're not in the room. You find opportunities for them that they may not be aware of. That's sponsorship, and it is a great example of allyship. But it is not the only example of allyship. You don't have to wait until you know somebody that well before you can be their ally. Allyship is all 6 of these behaviors: advocate, listen, lift, include, elevate, and sponsor. And it is about recognizing the moments that matter, the little things. These are not huge things that take you out of your way, that you have to make your job or your lifetime. It is about becoming more aware of what is around you, who is um, getting selected for different roles, who is being asked to speak, how people are engaging in dynamics in meetings. It is the little things that create that level of allyship. And just remember that every moment of allyship that you practice creates a ripple. And that ripple grows bigger and bigger and wider and wider. And that is how you create the culture of inclusion within your organization. So thank you. For additional resources, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you're interested in the training, you can go to visit any number of these locations and or just send me a note in LinkedIn. So, so Melissa, do you have any questions following?
I do. Well, first of all, thank you, because it just got me thinking you mentioned you were in leadership role at Microsoft for 26 years. For those of us that have all been in leadership roles, we sort of grew up and climbed the corporate ladder, with the idea of, okay, as we manage these teams, we now need to promote and find people that can take on more responsibility. But I don't know that until very recently, when the whole concept of belonging, sort of joined the whole DEI acronym, that we started thinking more about, I think really what belonging is in some cases is allyship, right? I mean, there are some other definitions of belonging as well. So I think it's really eye-opening, and you present it in such a simple way. I guess my first question for you would be, how do you start to measure the success? So you're a leader, you're familiar with advocating, listening, and lifting. You've sort of identified, maybe you start with one individual that you've identified that could really use allyship. How do you measure how, I hate to say successful, but how inclusive, you're helping this individual become? Are there any tips or tricks for things to look for to see if you're having an impact?
So what you're doing is you're modeling this inclusive behavior, you're setting new norms. You can do that. I did that within my team in a very clear way. Like, I actually put this up on the walls as these are our norms, right? This is what we do for each other. We and then you spell things out. We don't interrupt each other. We listen with curiosity, right? You set these as your norms. And then the way that you start to measure that is you, as the leader, start to recognize, are others in your team also practicing these allyship behaviors? Right now, you can do those pulse surveys and various things where you ask people, do you feel a sense of belonging? Do you feel, that you can speak up, speak your mind, even when it's unpopular? You can ask them all those kinds of questions to know, are you creating that environment? But you actually start to just feel it when others individual, not just the leader, are saying, oh wait, I don't think we've heard from you yet, and I really, we had a great conversation last week and I'd love for you to share that. Or oh, what, so and so wasn't quite done. When people start to mirror those behaviors and practice those behaviors, it's very easy for you to see that. The way that I measured that on my team is I actually made that part of our core commitments, was we act with allyship, right? We act with intention to include others. And these are the behaviors that we will reward and recognize and watch for.
I love the idea of more that it's becomes a norm versus identifying individuals, because frankly, whether you're part of a perceived marginalized group or not, is any more junior person in an organization, and sometimes even senior, you would hope that people would always let you finish talking. You would hope that people would, if they saw enough value in hiring you, would value your expertise. But I think sometimes, especially with technology, we've gotten so far afield of what used to be, I guess, the cultural norms and different areas of politeness that you sort of almost need this as a reminder. So it almost sounds like, on the one hand, as a DEI advocate within a company, is you want to make this part of your cultural norms. But what about also giving people the opportunity that are either in those lower rungs or feeling marginalized, whether it's perceived or not? How do they go about asking for allyship? You had mentioned that when you're in Microsoft, you sort of talk to everyone, but you're also at a pretty senior level, right? So you had a bit of a voice.
Not at the time that I was doing that, right?
So talk to us about that a little bit.
Right. So, so I, at one point in my career, when I was fairly junior, I made this move from sales and marketing into product management, right? In product management, you work with engineers as opposed to customers, right? And as a woman working with the engineers and coming from sales, where they totally discount anything you have to say, like, I was having a really hard time having them pay attention to what I had to say. And so I went to someone I perceived as an influential leader in their organization, not necessarily the leader, but an influential person. And I told him, I was like, I'm having a really hard time. Like, give me some coaching. What am I doing wrong? What am I saying wrong? And he was like, well, I don't know, like, they're just not listening, right? And I was like, yeah, they don't believe me. Like, I have no credibility, right? And I didn't say I have no credibility because I'm a woman. I just thought, I don't know what to do, right? And he said, I know what to do. And so what he did is he convened a meeting, and he said, I was meeting with Gavriella, and we were talking about this product, and here were some of the ideas that she had, and here's why she had that, and the insight that she had. I believe these are really good ideas. And then he said, Gavriella, do you want to share with the group? And I did. And after that meeting, the whole tenor changed, because he lent his credibility to me.
Like it. So this whole idea of conferring your credibility, conferring your power, it's not necessarily the most senior to the most junior. It's as you said, it's the influencers, right? It's the people that have the ear of the masses. So that's a great tip. So for DEI specialists that are listening today, that are really, I would have to think, loving what you're suggesting, but maybe aren't at a point in their strategic planning process where all of a sudden they can just, hey, we've got a whole new set of norms. Here's what we're going to do. Where do you start?
Well, I mean, you can start by just talking about allyship in a really action-oriented way. I think there's a way of talking about allyship in the community that tends to be kind of theoretical, and talks about, like, understanding where somebody else might be coming from, understanding other cultures. Those are all very important things. But what really matters is the action you take in the moment, recognition in the moment. And if you don't understand where someone might be coming from, asking them, right? Not at, if you're not comfortable asking them in that moment in public, you can ask them later. Like, I didn't understand. It seemed like this made you really uncomfortable. Can you share more with me? Right? It's like, what you want to do as the DEI lead is you want to help your leaders understand just how to be better leaders. And so you say, like, here's one way you can be a better leader. Really understand, like, what are the hot buttons for the people in your team, and how do you help them? Ask them, how do you help them to engage and be productive and feel like they're contributing in those moments? Like, what are some of the challenges that they're facing? Ask them,
It's
right?
that old, if there's one thing I could do to help make your job more productive or better, what would it be? Right.
Yep.
I think it's a great question. Wow. And you also mentioned that you have a training program that is all around this. So for anybody that's interested, they can go to a couple of the different websites that you had posted up on the screen. But in the meantime, thank you, Gavriella. First of all, thank you for spearheading this, because I think it's such an important component of leadership skills and training to really help organizations be inclusive, but frankly, also, as you showed at the very beginning, be a lot more productive, right? So there's a moral imperative here, there's an economic imperative here, and it's always great when the two can support each other. So thank you for such a great presentation, and for being a part of the 2023 Global DEI Conference. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And we look forward to hearing from you again in the future. And thank you everyone for joining us today at the 2023 Global DEI Conference. We look forward to hosting you again soon.